The bird first appeared 3 days before he died. Nobody thought much about it at the time. Just a small dark bird sitting quietly outside the kitchen window every morning. Same branch, same angle, watching the house in complete silence while the old man drank his coffee alone. At first, it felt ordinary. Then it kept returning. Every single day, even during rain, even during heavy wind, as if it was waiting for something. And maybe you've experienced moments like this too. A strange animal appearing repeatedly during emotionally important periods of your life. A bird outside the hospital window, a crow near a funeral, a robin returning after someone disappears forever. Most people dismiss these moments immediately, but deep down, something about them lingers. Because timing changes everything. And when nature appears at emotionally impossible moments, the human brain struggles to let it go. The old man died on a cold Thursday morning just before sunrise. Quietly. No dramatic final words. No grand farewell. Just silence filling the house where a human voice used to exist. And according to his daughter, the strangest part happened the very next morning. The bird came back. Same branch. Same time. Waiting at the window as if nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. Because the man was gone. Yet the bird remained. Now scientifically, researchers would offer simple explanations immediately. Birds are creatures of routine. If food, shelter, or familiarity existed near a location, returning behavior makes perfect sense. But grief changes human perception in powerful ways. Psychologists call it meaning reconstruction. After loss, the brain desperately searches for emotional continuity. Signs, symbols, tiny connections that soften the unbearable finality of death. And suddenly ordinary things begin feeling extraordinary. A song plays at the perfect moment. A clock stops unexpectedly. A bird returns to the same branch outside an empty room. Coincidence becomes emotionally charged because grief itself transforms how humans see the world. But what happened next was even stranger. Because the bird didn't simply return once. It kept returning for months. And eventually, the entire neighborhood noticed it too. Every morning, just after dawn, the bird appeared again. Same branch. Same silence. Sometimes it tapped softly against the glass. Sometimes it only watched. The daughter tried ignoring it at first. Grief already distorts reality enough without attaching meaning to animals. She knew that. Rationally, she understood that the bird likely associated the house with routine movement and familiarity. But emotionally, it felt impossible to separate the bird from her father. Because during the final years of his life, he had become deeply attached to feeding birds in the backyard. Not casually, ritually. Every morning before sunrise, even during winter, he scattered seeds along the fence while speaking softly to them, as if they understood every word. Neighbors laughed about it affectionately. He trusts birds more than people, they used to say. And honestly, maybe he did. Loneliness changes relationships in strange ways, especially in old age. Researchers studying elderly individuals discovered that repeated interactions with birds and wildlife significantly reduce feelings of emotional isolation. Not because animals replace human connection, but because routine contact with living creatures restores a feeling of participation in the world. A bird visiting daily can become emotionally important in ways younger people often underestimate. Presence matters. Consistency matters. Being noticed matters. Especially when the world begins forgetting you. And perhaps that's why the bird outside the window felt so deeply unsettling after his death. It didn't feel random. It felt loyal. Researchers studying crows, ravens, parrots, and other intelligent birds discovered something extraordinary over the past 2 decades. Many birds form highly specific memory associations with individual humans. They recognize faces, remember routines, detecting emotional patterns. Some even show signs of distress when familiar humans disappear suddenly. Which raises a difficult question. What exactly did the bird understand? Did it know the old man was gone? Or was it simply waiting for a familiar figure who would never return? That question haunted the daughter more than she wanted to admit. Because every morning the bird arrived, the house briefly felt alive again. Not healed, just less empty. And maybe that's why humans throughout history have linked birds to death, memory, and the afterlife. Not because birds literally carry souls, but because they move between worlds humans emotionally struggle to understand. Sky and earth, presence and absence, arrival and disappearance. In ancient cultures, birds were often treated as messengers because they seemed untethered to human limitations. They appeared suddenly, vanished suddenly, crossed impossible distances effortlessly. And grief makes humans especially vulnerable to symbolism. When someone dies, the mind becomes hyper-aware of patterns. You begin noticing every strange coincidence, every repeated sound, every recurring animal, because part of you desperately wants to believe love leaves echoes behind. But the most unbelievable part came later, because eventually, the birds started behaving differently, almost intentionally. And this is where the story changes completely. Months passed. The daughter stopped telling people about the bird because their reactions always sounded the same. It's probably nesting nearby. It remembers the food. You're just grieving. And maybe they were right. But then one evening after work, she arrived home unusually late. The bird was there, waiting. Not at dawn, not in the morning routine. At dusk, watching the driveway silently from the fence. The moment she stepped out of the car, it flew closer instead of away. That detail disturbed her deeply. Wild birds usually avoid humans instinctively, but this one remained strangely calm around her, especially after her father's death. And researchers actually understand part of why this happens. Birds capable of advanced recognition often transfer familiarity associations between related humans sharing the same environment. If the old man fed and protected birds consistently, nearby birds may have generalized safety toward people connected to him and the property. Scientifically, that explanation makes sense. Emotionally, it still felt personal, because grief transforms ordinary interactions into emotional mirrors. The daughter began sitting outside at night listening to the sounds her father once listened to. Wind moving through trees, soft wing beats overhead, morning birdsong before sunrise. And slowly she noticed something painful. The bird had become tied to memory itself. Its arrival reopened emotions she kept trying to bury beneath routine. Researchers studying grief discovered that humans often maintain continuing bonds with loved ones after death. Contrary to older psychological theories, healing doesn't always mean completely letting go. Sometimes healing means learning to carry memory differently. Through objects, places, songs, animals, tiny recurring rituals that keep emotional connection alive without destroying you. And perhaps that explains why so many grieving people become attached to birds after loss. Not because they truly believe the bird is a supernatural messenger, but because the bird becomes a living bridge between past and present. A reminder that love once existed here, that someone once stood in this exact yard breathing the same cold morning air. And honestly, maybe that emotional connection matters more than whether the experience is scientifically explainable. But researchers didn't expect what they found next about birds and death itself. Because some birds appear to react to loss in ways disturbingly similar to humans. Scientists studying crows noticed something unusual years ago. When a crow dies, others gather around the body, sometimes silently, sometimes vocalizing loudly from nearby trees. At first, researchers assumed the birds were merely identifying danger. But over time, the behavior appeared emotionally heavier than expected. The birds lingered, watched, returned repeatedly. Some researchers cautiously described the behavior as possible mourning-like responses. Not human grief exactly, but something emotionally adjacent to it. And crows aren't alone. Elephants revisit bones. Dolphins remain beside dead companions. Certain parrots display visible distress after losing bonded partners. Again and again, nature reveals something humans once desperately wanted to deny. Emotion may not belong exclusively to us, which changes the way we view animal encounters entirely. Because if animals can remember loss, if they can form attachment, if they can experience absence, then suddenly the bird outside the daughter's window feels less like a random coincidence and more like part of a deeper emotional reality we still barely understand. Not supernatural, just profoundly alive. And maybe that's what unsettles people most. The possibility that animals perceive emotional changes in the environment far more deeply than we assumed. The house changed after the old man died. Its sounds changed. Its rhythms changed. Its emotional atmosphere changed. Even humans walking into grieving homes often sense it instantly, without explanation. Quieter, heavier, emptier. Why wouldn't animals notice too? Especially highly observant birds who survived for millions of years by reading environmental shifts constantly. The daughter eventually admitted something to herself she had resisted for months. She began looking for the bird every morning. Not obsessively, hopefully, because its presence interrupted the worst part of grief. The terrifying feeling that life moves on too quickly after someone disappears. But the bird returning daily created the illusion that something still remembered him. Something still awaited him. And perhaps humans need that feeling more than we realize. To believe our existence leaves traces behind. To believe someone, or something, noticed we were here. That our routines mattered. Our kindness mattered. Our presence mattered. Maybe that's the hidden emotional force behind every story involving birds and death throughout human history. Birds become symbols of continuity, movement, return, memory surviving absence. But then something happened one winter morning that transformed the entire story forever. Because for the first time since the funeral, the bird didn't come back. At first she thought nothing of it. Birds disappear sometimes. Weather changes. Migration shifts. Nature moves unpredictably. But days passed. Then weeks. The branch outside the kitchen window remained empty. And strangely, the silence hurt more than she expected. Because only after the bird vanished did she realize what it had truly become. Not a sign. Not a ghost. Not proof of anything supernatural. A companion to grief. A quiet witness during the loneliest chapter of her life. And perhaps that's why humans form such deep emotional attachments to recurring animals after loss. Not because the animal literally carries messages from the dead, but because it helps carry memory forward. The bird had unknowingly given shape to emotions too large for language. Every return softened the brutal finality of death slightly. Every appearance whispered the same impossible feeling. He was real. He was here. He mattered. Psychologists sometimes describe grief as a fight against emotional disappearance. Humans fear not only losing people, but losing evidence they ever existed at all. And maybe that's why small recurring signs become psychologically powerful. A scent in an empty room. A favorite song playing unexpectedly. A bird returning to an old window every morning. These moments create continuity between absence and presence. Not magic. Meaning. And meaning is one of the most powerful survival mechanisms humans possess. Months later, the daughter found herself waking before sunrise again. Coffee in hand. Standing beside the same kitchen window her father once stood beside. The bird never returned. But strangely, the mornings no longer felt empty. Because somewhere during those silent months, grief had changed shape. Not disappeared, just softened around the edges. And maybe that's the hidden truth beneath stories like this. Sometimes animals enter emotionally important moments in human lives not because they are supernatural messengers, but because nature has always been quietly accompanying us through our most painful transitions. Birds witness our routines, our loneliness, our aging, our grief. They appear during funerals, outside hospitals, near empty houses where someone's voice recently vanished forever. And humans, desperate for emotional continuity, naturally weave those appearances into stories. Not because we are foolish, because we are human. We need symbols for loss, symbols for memory, symbols for the terrifying fact that life continues moving after people we love are gone. Birds simply become perfect carriers for those emotions because they embody something humans ache for after death. Movement beyond disappearance. Flight beyond endings. And maybe that's why the image of a bird returning after someone dies feels so deeply haunting across every culture on Earth. Not because we truly believe the bird contains the person, but because part of us hopes love leaves echoes in the world somehow. Tiny living echoes. A shadow on a fence. Wings outside a silent window. A familiar presence returning one more time before finally disappearing into the sky. And honestly, maybe that hope is beautiful. Have you ever experienced an animal appearing repeatedly after losing someone, in a way that felt impossible to explain?